Hello, Indiana fans, and welcome to another Hoosiers Roundtable podcast. I am Brandon Brown, joined as always by Jack Ankony and Todd Golden. And it's a pretty exciting time of the year, obviously, fellas. We've got the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament right around the corner. The regular season is officially a wrap. Regular season awards have been handed out. Jack was out west covering a couple away games. Had a good time in the Pacific Northwest, I believe, and we'll talk about that obviously with Indiana's matchup against Oregon coming up. But first, let's just put a quick bow on the season ending. The last time we were on, we talked about how big of a deal it would be for Indiana to get a win over Ohio State. They did that. Close one. A bit of a rocky start for the Hoosiers, but they did pull it out 66-60. So, Todd, we will start with you. We've talked to you a lot about the inconsistency. I mean, we've all talked about the inconsistency, but that seems to be something that you've brought up a lot of times. And this time it was, Indiana finished on the good side of things. A bit of a rough start, but they close it out. They get the win to close out the regular season. Why do you think they were able to beat Ohio State in one of these close games when we've seen it go the other way so many times?
Their defense in the last 10 minutes of the game was on point because they really didn't play very well in that game for most of its running. I mean, they were down 10 points, I think it was, with a little over 10 minutes to play. My memory's a little off on that, but then they committed to defense, and Ohio State was really poor in the last 5 minutes of the game, and IU's defense had a lot to do with it. Neither team was very good offensively in that game, but IU got some timely shots, and Trey Galloway with the biggest one, a deep three-pointer that kind of turned out to be the icebreaker in the end. But I thought Indiana's defensive effort down the stretch was something that they can build on and something that they can kind of hang their hat on as they go into the Big Ten tournament. They needed to have it, and they haven't always been able to get stops, but they were on Saturday and did them a world of good.
And Jack, I mean, same type of thing. I mean, we've talked about the ups and downs and why they've been able to win some and why they've been able to lose some. And was this could you just chalk this up as like they knew they had to get it? Like, we got to get this one heading into the Big Ten tournament, or it might not matter what we do in Indy.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into the game, like, it's senior day for a lot of the guys like Anthony Leal and Galloway and Luke Goody, and it's Mike Woodson's last game at Ohio, at Assembly Hall. So, I do think there was kind of that, like, not only do we need this to make the tournament and keep our season alive in that perspective, but it's our last time here, and kind of that sense of urgency. I think Todd's right. I thought Anthony Leal played some good defense on Bruce Thornton down the stretch, and really limited them. And then obviously Galloway hit that crazy shot. That was, one of those like, oh no, oh yes type of plays where like the shot clock was running down, just sort of hoists it up, and great moment for him ending his career at Assembly Hall.
Yeah, I mean, you let me know. I was thinking like, okay, it's kind of a late game. I'm going to be up all night uploading all these videos, all these different things the seniors are going to have to talk about. And then they did it a little differently. They kind of combined it. Like, I guess for someone like me who wasn't there and other Indiana fans who might not have been in the house, what was the senior day stuff like? What was a little different? What was the same? Just, kind of break that down for people who might not have seen it yet or don't know what went on.
Yeah, so usually they do speeches with all the players and Woodson, and this year they just decided basically to do video tributes on the scoreboard, where the players were talking and where Woodson gave a message, and they did a kind of an individual video for Woodson too. And then Anthony Leal took the mic and kind of gave a pretty brief speech, 1 or 2 minutes, there at the end to kind of speak for the senior class, I guess, in general. And Mike Woodson didn't talk, and I think it went fine. Like, I mean, I think maybe some people were disappointed that you don't have that they didn't do the traditional speeches, but people were also upset last year when Woodson made the comments about the true fans sticking by him, and people kind of took that the wrong way. So that I think that probably played into part of the reason why he didn't do it, and the fact that he's gone now. But I think it ended up being all right. Like, I think it was a little bit kind of like wait and see how it goes, or how fans would react to it. But altogether, I thought it was all right.
That's where I was going to go to you, Todd, was there a sense that something was off? Is it because Woodson's done? Is it because I just wondered, why the change up? I mean, there was what was it? Eight guys? Eight seniors.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big chunk of the team that didn't get to participate in something that they normally would have. I don't know. Like I was saying, I was going back and forth with Jack later at night, kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. And then all of a sudden I found out that it was going to be quite a bit different. So I just wondered maybe what the reception was and what people have kind of been thinking about how they chose to do it.
I think because they won, it was fine. I think most people were okay with it because it was sort of a happy ending to the game. The nature of the game was such that it wasn't like, every game is, you see a lot of scores. The score was 66-60, where it depends on how you approach, how you got to the score. It reflects the mood of the crowd. In IU's case, they came back to win, so everybody was happy with a 6-point win. If IU had been up 20 for most of the game and Ohio State cut it to 6, you would have had some people dissatisfied. So the vibe in the place was positive to begin with. I think that helped. And, the truth is a lot of people leave for the speeches. Yeah. So you're talking about maybe a third of the crowd was still left for the speeches. So it's not like you got, 16,000 people waiting on a speech, at least not this year. So there's that too. And then once the format played out, I mean, I actually was sitting among some of the families. I stationed myself at a place where because I did see a microphone on the floor and I knew somebody would be speaking and I wanted to be in a good place to shoot the video for it. And so I was with the families and they probably already knew, I'm sure, but they didn't seem to mind it that much. They did video tributes instead, which, they're fine. I mean, I do like the honesty, though, of the senior day speeches. Last year, Mike Woodson was pretty brutally honest in what he wanted to say, but so was Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal in announcing that they were going to return. And so a part of me didn't like it because I don't like controlling the message, and that's essentially what Indiana wanted to do. But is it like something to, storm the administration mill? Not really. I mean, it was okay. It worked out fine. Nobody really walked away. I didn't hear anybody going, man, I wish there'd been all these speeches, So, I think it was fine. And, originally I was going to write a column about there being no speeches, but because of the reaction of the crowd, I kind of abandoned that because I don't really think there was any kind of major reaction to it. So I think it would have been cool to hear some of those guys speak, maybe not all 8 of them, but the prominent guys. And it would have been really cool to hear Woodson speak to the crowd, but clearly either he didn't want any part of it, IU didn't want any part of it, or both. So we didn't get that. But as it turned out, it was fine. It was perfectly fine.
What's I mean, that seems like a lot of seniors to me. Like, have they had 8 guys speak? I mean, if each guy even speaks for 2 minutes, like you're sitting there for 20 minutes listening to these speeches. I just wondered, did that play a role? I mean, is that a normal number for Indiana? Like, I don't know, just kind of curious. So we'll move on from this here in a minute.
But. I mean, the portal or the extra year plays a role in that. A lot of them were walk-ons, and walk-ons usually do get to speak. So, I mean, I can't sit here and say that it's unprecedented. It is a high number. But that's also, you also had guys, that's probably the other thing. I mentioned that Galloway and Leal spoke last year. I mean, these days you get players going through like 3 different senior day ceremonies. I mean, there's every year is different. So there's new things to say, I guess. But at the end of the day, some of those guys already got their shot. I don't know if Umar Ballo had his shot at Arizona last year or what, but it's a tradition that goes back. Indiana has always been very proud of it. A lot of other schools, especially here in the state of Indiana, have adopted it too. But, again, I don't think anybody was freaking out about not having all 8 speeches.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. Just something I thought was like, again, I'm sitting up waiting, thinking I'm gonna have to get 8 individual videos ready to fire off, and then it turns out there's only 1, and then I don't think Indiana even ended up sending it anyway to the media people. So it was an interesting night for me as I was trying to figure all that stuff out. All right, another thing that I found interesting as you guys put together these outlines for us each week to talk about different things, and I kind of go through and start doing my homework a little bit. Mike Woodson said, maybe I'm leaving too soon. Jack, I think you told me that this was on a TV interview, right? I think you said that.
Yeah.
So clearly he knows people are going to see that. It wasn't like he said it like tucked off in a hallway somewhere after a game with, 6 local media people. So what are we doing here, Mike? What are we talking about saying maybe I'm leaving too soon now?
Yeah. So it was on the CBS broadcast on the court after the game. So pretty much like, right after the buzzer, go through the handshake line. And kind of the team, like they did a few games ago, sort of huddled around him and kind of celebrated with him on the court. But yeah, I mean, I think he was being honest about it. I mean, I think part of him is probably like, hey, I took, probably took the team to the tournament 3 out of 4 years, and like, I think before Woodson it hadn't gone in 5 years. And I'm not saying that they should keep him or that they will, because I think at this point, no matter what happens, there's no way they're going to reverse the decision they made. But I do think like he looks at it and being like, hey, like we've lost some close games this year. We've kind of turned it around, and we still haven't met the expectations. But I think part of him is always going to sort of be like, kind of wondering like if he should have stepped down this early or just how the whole situation played out. And he was asked about it in the press conference after about that comment. And he was like, well, I sort of just want to keep, he was like, that'll always be kind of in the back of your mind. But I kind of want to keep the focus on the seniors. So he didn't really want to talk about it a whole lot after. But no, I do think he was honest in saying that. I don't think it was sort of like a sarcastic thing. I mean, I don't think they'll go back on the decision now or depend even if they make a run. But yeah, I think that was a genuine kind of reaction from him, and you saw him be very emotional on the court afterwards with the players and his assistant coaches. So yeah, those are sort of my thoughts on it.
Todd, do you think he should have said it? Let's just do an opinion type of thing right there. I mean, like he said it. It sounds like he meant it. There was no sarcasm involved, and I'm sure, like, he's a competitor. It's his alma mater. Like, I'm sure he wishes he could have done a better job, and maybe now he thinks like, damn, maybe, exactly how, like Jack said, how exactly did it play out? Like, you always wonder that when coaches get, like, was he forcefully said you're going to resign, or was he kind of on board with it as well? Like, some of those things we might not ever know exactly, but do you think he should have said that in that setting on national TV, given that they still have some more stuff to play for, and like, who knows what he's thinking now?
I've got no problem with him saying it. I mean, he's got the right to say what he wants. He's been very measured in the way he's handled this. Indiana's been very measured in the way they've handled it, meaning there hasn't been a whole lot of comments on it much at all. So if Mike Woodson wants to use his opportunity to, even off the cuff, to some degree, the comment was a little bit off the cuff. I think he meant it. But no, I don't have any problem with that. I mean, he's still the coach. They wanted him the coach for the rest of the year. They have played better since he resigned. Mm-hmm. So if he wants to express, I don't care what he wants to express. He has the right to express it. He's still the guy in charge. And, if he wants to use that forum to, express a little bit of mild regret, good for him. I mean, but the toothpaste, as Jack said, the toothpaste is out of the tube. It isn't going to change. I don't get the sense that Mike Woodson wants to change it, whether he says he left too soon or not. I mean, because some of the stuff he's endured from the worst of the Indiana fans has been unacceptable, in terms of the vitriol that's been tossed to him and his family. So I think there's a little bit of that's involved in his comment too, to some of the fans who have criticized him. Now, some of the criticism has been warranted within reason, as long as it stays within the bounds of the job. But some fans take it too far, and when you're in that fishbowl, you can't blame somebody for getting a little bit miffed with that. So no, I don't have any issue with it at all. I think it's fine.
Jack, I want to ask you, and then we'll move on from this comment thing that he made. Do you think is this a problem in any way? I mean, are the players like, oh man, like I wish Coach wasn't leaving, or like, look how we're playing now. Like, does this matter at all, or is it just a quick comment that got a little bit of attention and it'll be nothing during the next 2 weeks or so?
Well, I will say that whenever the players get asked, or not even when they're asked about Woodson, like you never really you always hear them speak very highly of him.
Mhm.
Like I think Anthony Leal said after the game, like, shout out to Coach Woodson, he means the world to us. Like you see comments from former players who played at Indiana the last few years, like on social media and stuff, like showing their appreciation for him. So like I guess like I think there would be a lot. I mean, a lot of these players will be gone because they're seniors, but I'm sure like for players like Malik Renew or like other guys that have been like, I think they genuinely like Woodson. That's the impression that I've always gotten. I mean, maybe it hasn't always worked out basketball wise, and there could be some outliers, but he has had some guys transfer out of the program. Like, you don't always know the reason for that, but like, I think in general, I've always gotten the sense that his players like him, and that Todd mentioned how Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal last year during senior day, they took their senior day speech as an opportunity to be like, hey, you guys, like Indiana fans need to chill out. We're gonna, figure this out, and we love playing for Coach Woodson. And again, it hasn't all played out how they wanted it to, and they haven't met some of their own expectations. But I don't think there's any personal like, oh, we want Woodson out of here from the players. I think they all like him, and a good amount, yeah.
Okay, well, it's interesting now because they do finish the game. They do finish the season winning the last 2 out of 3. They beat Washington. They beat Ohio State, lose to Oregon. We'll talk about that a little bit here before we kind of set the table for the Big Ten tournament. And I believe they're still being talked about as a bubble team. We'll kind of finish with that, the NCAA tournament stuff, before we get into some of the player awards. But
hey, can I say something on Woodson real quick?
Yeah, for sure, of course.
Here's one problem that we all have: fans, media, everybody, and part of it comes from the wall that is put between Woodson and his players and the public and the media too. We've never been to a Woodson practice. The only interaction we ever have is in press conference settings or occasional Zoom meeting. So we don't really get to pick up very much on, what the relationship between coach and player is. And I think Indiana does a disservice to itself by and they do it with, it's not just Woodson, they do it with a lot of coaches, to where they're kind of off and they kind of put them in an ivory tower a little bit, and we never really get to know these players or coaches on more of an intimate level. It's not so much of a problem with football, but basketball, I mean, other than the institutional media day they have at the beginning of the year, we very rarely have any interactions with any of these people in any meaningful way other than asking questions at a press conference. And I know some fans, donors and all that, have better access and all of that. But I think Indiana, whoever comes in as the next coach, they need to revisit how much they're opening up this person to the public so they can sell them to the public. I think that's one of the issues with Woodson is people know who Mike Woodson is because he played at IU. He's a program legend. He was an NBA coach. I don't know that anybody ever really got to know Mike Woodson as a person while he was here. And sometimes that helps. And if you know somebody as a person a little bit, maybe the criticism is a little bit different. It would still come, but maybe it wouldn't have been as vitriolic as it was at its worst. And I think that's something Indiana needs to think about in terms of how they present their coaches and players to the public, because, and I'm not just saying that because I want more access. That'd be great. But I really do think it really does Indiana a disservice when they kind of control the message with these guys a little bit too much, to the point where they kind of lose control of the message when the public just makes up their own minds about what these people are.
Well said. Well said. I mean, you guys know my background. I was covering Michigan for the entire Jim Harbaugh tenure, and we saw exactly 0 seconds of practice for 10 years. I mean, it's the same thing. And we'd say that all the time. Like, you'd hear these narratives that would be like, well, let us help. Like, we can be a help, like in most cases. And
right.
It's kind of weird when programs do that. I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think, sort of to what we were talking earlier, like, Woodson got asked after the game, like, what went into your decision to step down? Because initially they told us like, he's going to talk about it at the time that he wants to. And so I think there's sort of this, when Woodson makes a comment like, maybe I'm leaving too soon, I think a lot of people are like, well, are you the one stepping down, or are you getting forced out? Like there's sort of been this kind of uncertainty, and people can draw their own conclusions and have their own opinion on what it is. But like, I think when he makes a comment like that versus the public statement of he's stepping down after the season and there's no quote from him or anything about that, and he doesn't want to talk about it after it, I think it sort of adds to just kind of the uncertainty and the perception kind of issue that Todd was talking about. So
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting thing to say. Obviously, like I said, he didn't think it was going to go unnoticed, saying it on national TV right after the game. So
right.
yeah, it seems like there was maybe a little bit of intent, and you just always kind of wonder what maybe that was. But he's not out of there just yet. He's got a guaranteed one game left, so we'll see what that looks like. It is against Oregon tomorrow at noon. The Big Ten tournament gets going here, about an hour and a half from when we're recording this, for the bottom feeders, as you maybe could call them. And then, then the next round kind of gets going on Thursday. So we'll go back to Todd. They do take on Oregon, who they just lost to. We'll come back to Jack too, because he was actually in the house in Eugene for that one. But Oregon's an interesting team because at times they've looked incredible, and other times they haven't looked very good. And I think they're probably playing better in the second half of the season than the first half. But this, it's what we've all wondered about all along, these West Coast teams coming east, and it's hard, it's tough to do, and so you wonder how that will factor in. But what's the initial prognosis for this matchup against Oregon again, when they just played, what was it, on the
third, I think,
on the fourth? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty recent memory for all of us. Oregon's an interesting team because they're the one Big Ten team. Actually, it's interesting. All four of the West Coast teams won at least 2 games coming east. Oregon won more than most. They were pretty impressive, actually, when they came east to play. But then, bizarrely, they weren't that great playing at home against some of the Big Ten teams. I mean, Indiana had a shot to win that game last week and gave up a 10-0 run at the end to fall after leading with under 2 minutes to go. The game, Jack can speak to the game more specifically. He was there, but the game had some weird anomalies to it in terms of what the teams have done all year. Oregon didn't shoot well from 3-point range. They've been a good 3-point shooting team for most of the year. At least for most of the game, they didn't shoot well from 3-point range. At the end, they hit a big one, but so that was one thing that was odd. Indiana, I'm trying to remember who had the rebounding advantage, but whoever did typically wouldn't. So they are interesting in that they have some good pieces, but not a dominant piece in terms of offense. Jackson Shellstad, again, I can say that 3 times fast, hit the big shot at the end, but he wasn't consistent through the game. Nate Biddle is a presence in the paint defensively, and he was good offensively, but he's not always. So they're in many ways a lot like Indiana, where they have some pieces who come to the forefront at times, but not others. So it should be an interesting game. I think of all the teams that are coming to Indianapolis, I actually think that they probably can do a little bit better than most, other than maybe UCLA, who has a favorable draw in terms of having the double bye. But I trust Oregon a little bit more than I would some of the other West Coast schools, because they typically in the NCAA tournament do well too. I mean, they've made some deep runs under Dana Allman. So just for those general reasons, I think it's going to be a tough game tomorrow for Indiana.
I mean, it is an 8-9 matchup. I mean, it's not that you necessarily would have a huge favorite in either direction, but yeah, Jack. I mean, you were in the house. You saw him very recently within the last 7-8 days, and obviously Indiana came up a little bit short in that one. But it does feel like a game that either of these teams probably could win. I'm sure they're both feeling that way anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting it to be another close one. Like, you look at the final score, 73-64, and it doesn't look too close, but Oregon closed that game on a 10-0 run in the last minute and a half. Galloway put him up with the 3 late, and then Shellstad hit that super deep 3. which I still contest that. I thought Indiana played pretty solid defense to force a 35-footer on that one, but Mike Woodson kind of disagreed with me after. But he wanted Leal kind of to be denying that pass, which fair point. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I do think it'll be close. I think Oregon Biddle is a tough matchup, as Todd mentioned, for Ballo and Renew. Like, I think a big reason Indiana won against Ohio State is because they were sort of just able to lean on Renew down the stretch. You probably can't do that to the same degree going up against Biddle. I think Oregon is like, they don't do anything particularly like outstanding, but they also don't have a major weakness, I think. They had 2 guys on the Big Ten all-defensive team. So, they're pretty balanced. And Shellstead, he's hit a bunch of, not even just in the Indiana game, he's hit a bunch of clutch shots late, super fast guard. So I'm expecting a close one, and one that if Indiana can win, probably punches their ticket to the tournament. And if they don't, they're probably getting pretty nervous on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, it's interesting that you would outline it that way. No first team or second team all Big Ten performers on Oregon's team or Indiana's team for that matter. So you've got some, like you said, it kind of writes itself. You've got an 8-9 matchup, middle of the pack, a bunch of guys that can do a bunch of different stuff. Nobody's really, really great at anything, or neither team really seems to be horrible at anything. I think a lot of people would probably say the same thing about Indiana. They've been up and down, but when they're good, they're pretty good. And when when they've been bad, they've looked not so good. So yeah, it's going to be what I would think a pretty contested game. You would expect that between the 8 and 9 seed. I don't think that's really going out on a limb and saying anything there. But let's say, well, I'm not going to let's say. I'll have you guys say if they win, what does that do for their NCAA tournament chances? And if they lose, if they're one and done, and that's it for the Big Ten tournament, Todd, how is this thing looking? What's the bubble look like for Indiana right now, and what do they need to do tomorrow and maybe beyond?
The bubble is tightened a little bit. I mean, depending on which bracketology you look at, Indiana is either one of the last teams to avoid the first 4 or they're in the first 4, and that's as of today. If they beat Oregon, I think they're fine. I think they'll. And fine to the point where I don't think they'll be playing in Dayton in the first 4 either. They'll most likely be an 11 seed, maybe if they get lucky, a 10 seed. I know Jerry Palm has them as a 10 seed, but he's an outlier. Most bracketologists have them as an 11 or even a 12 if they have them in the first 4. So if they beat Oregon, I think they're okay. I'll tell you one key. I should have mentioned this when I was speaking before. Jack mentioned Malik Renew. One thing I recall from last week's game is Malik, if Malik can be more decisive in the paint, I think IU wins that game, because Malik has the tendency to kind of slow down in the post. And he did that. He got too deep last week, and it allowed Biddle and others to close down on him, and he wasn't very effective. If he goes straight to the rim, I don't think Oregon will react quick enough, because they're going to need to be accounting for Umar Ballo and the shooters. I think Indiana wins that game. But he needs to do it, and he doesn't always do that. And I think that's going to be a big key tomorrow. But yeah, if IU wins, I think they're in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, yeah, I think they avoid Dayton the first 4 if they win. It would be a quad 1 win. So good for their resume in terms of that, which is probably another reason why the Ohio State win was so big, because now you're playing Thursday instead of Wednesday, and you get your shot at a quality win right away instead of having to win one and then win another. If they lose, I mean, it might depend on like the nature of the loss. If it's one like last time where Oregon kind of pulls away in the last minute, they're probably still fine. But if they lose by 15 or 20, and there's a bunch. I mean, the other thing is like how many bid stealers there are, what happens in all these other conference tournaments and things like that. Like if North Carolina goes on a run and wins the ACC tournament or something like that. It's not necessarily just like a win and you're in, losing you're out type of thing. There are definitely other factors with the bubble teams and stuff, but I think they can lose and still get in. It's just you're going to be sitting on Selection Sunday very nervous and kind of monitoring the scores throughout the week. I guess the other thing to mention too that I meant to talk about earlier is I just sort of wonder how the game's officiated, because that's what Woodson was really upset about, as mad as I've really ever seen him, was how Oregon they had 21 free throw attempts to Indiana's 7, and he didn't really want to get into like specific calls or areas, but he's like, it just can't be 21-7 is kind of what he kept repeating. And so we'll see if Indiana gets a little bit of a friendlier whistle, like with Renew and Ballo inside too. I think if I was looking earlier, Biddle attempted something like 8 free throws, and Ballo and Renew combined for like 3. And it was a pretty physical game, not even just inside, but on the perimeter too. So kind of interested to see how that plays out too.
Was that that was the infamous F-bomb presser, was it not? A couple of them,
Yeah.
I think Mike Woodson might have let fly there. So,
yeah,
not happy about the foul discrepancy. I remember watching that one thinking like, oh, there you go, a little fired up.
Yeah.
A little fired up after that one. Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like I said, it's the 8-9 matchup, and that's probably your cutoff line for Big Ten teams getting in, right? I mean, it's either going to be like Oregon's in, I would think, right? Like they're in,
Yeah.
and then Indiana's going to be right on the edge, and that's probably it. Nobody beyond them, I don't think. Maybe, I mean,
Ohio State,
maybe Ohio State. Yeah,
Yeah. I think if they win a game or two,
they're close. So it's, a lot of implications, getting ready to tip off tomorrow. And like I said, the Big Ten tournament starting on Wednesday afternoon, right at, about an hour after we get done recording this episode. That's when things will tip off. Who's the first game? Northwestern Minnesota, I believe. I think Northwestern Minnesota. Yep. 13-12 seed. So there you go. All right. So Indiana season, regular season, 19-12. 10-10 in the Big Ten, 9 seed in the Big Ten tournament against the 8 seed Oregon Ducks, who they just lost to 8 days ago. So a lot of interesting stuff coming up here in the next 48 hours for sure, and obviously the next couple of weeks with Big Ten tournament, Selection Sunday, and the NCAA tournament starting next week. All right, fellas, the Big Ten final or Big Ten regular season awards were also doled out over the last couple of days, and I think you guys are going to give your own versions of that and see if you deviate from what everybody else decided to say about the players in the Big Ten. So I think it was unanimous. I talked to Dustin about this, Dustin Schutte from the Purdue site. They didn't do the whole capitalized thing. So when you look on the official Big Ten website, first team, second, they capitalize everybody's name if it's a unanimous selection, but I don't think they do that for the other awards for whatever reason. But I think Braden Smith was the unanimous player of the year. I think Purdue's official basketball account tweeted that out. I think that's what Dustin said. Anyway, I digressed a little bit. Did you guys have somebody pegged other than Braden Smith as the Big Ten player of the year? Todd, we'll start with you.
I initially thought about it because I was like, my first reaction was, well, Purdue was picked to win the league and they're the 6th seed in the Big Ten tournament. Now that's kind of being unkind to Purdue. I think they actually tied for 4th and we're only maybe a game out of 2nd or something like that. So they were competitive and they were in the Big Ten race all year. So I quickly reassessed my own thought on that. And yeah, Braden Smith was pretty obviously the player of the year. I think the only statistical category in which he was down was 3-point shooting. But he didn't, that's not an important part of his role. Certainly is the best point guard in the Big Ten. And when you're the best point guard, you are on a good team, you're going to be a viable player of the year candidate. So yeah, I have no issue with that.
Jack, what about you?
Yeah, I'd go with Smith too. I mean, there was a time there in like February when Wisconsin won at Purdue that you thought maybe Tanjay would make a push, but they kind of faded at the end too. I actually don't think Smith was unanimous because looking at this email from the Big Ten, they did capitalize like Smith and Kaufman-Wren on first team, and his name isn't in caps on player of the year. So
that's what I thought. I asked Dustin, and he was like, "Well, the Purdue official account said it." But either way,
yeah,
I'm not sure who else would have gotten a vote. In my opinion, I don't really know who else that would have been. But either way it played out, he is the player of the year. So whether it was unanimous or not can be up for debate between the Indiana and Purdue folks, I guess.
Hey, I'm just going by the Big Ten email. They're capitalizing some of them, and they didn't for that. So I'm saying it's not unanimous.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Moving on to Coach of the Year. I got to see, my own personal interest watching the Michigan State game to close out the regular season. A little bit of a dust up at the end. I'm sure you guys saw a little bit about that. But Tom Izzo, I mean, Michigan fans hate him, but the dude has been doing it at a high level for a really long time. Michigan State was not picked to win the Big Ten this year, but they did it kind of going away, clinching it before the season even really ended. So I know earlier in the year there were maybe 4 or 5 guys who looked like they might have a shot at it, but I think Izzo was probably the only logical choice. Jack, what about you?
Yeah, I'd go with Izzo too. I mean, I think when you compare this team to other great Michigan State teams, they don't really have kind of that star player. That I think they're less talented than some of Izzo's teams in the past. But to win the Big Ten by 3 games, kind of going away. I mean, I think there are other coaches you could argue like Greg Gard. I think did a great job with based on where Wisconsin's expectations were preseason. I think Dusty made a push for it, but I'd go with Izzo fairly convincingly.
Yeah, I think at one point, maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe when there were 5, 6, 7 games left, something like that. It was probably a 4-man race. You had Dusty May, you had Tom Izzo, Greg Gard, and probably Matt Painter too, because I think Purdue was
Yeah,
in the
even
lead at the
Willard
time.
too.
Yeah,
Like you could probably argue Kevin Willard a little bit too.
pretty close for a while there, but Izzo seemed to kind of pull away a little bit. Todd, I would assume you concur.
Yeah. People have been digging Izzo's grave the last couple of years because, he hasn't adjusted to the new way of college basketball and the transfer portal and all that. And then he goes and uses his own method to go win the Big Ten by, 4 games? So he ain't dead yet. He's still getting it done in East Lansing, and he deserved the award this year. I would have had Dusty May too. I mean, I know he brought in plenty of transfers and he was a proven coach. He would, but it's still a challenge to drag a team that finished last in the Big Ten up to league contention. So he did a great job. Greg Gard Jack mentioned the others. Greg Gard, Kevin Willard probably deserved a little bit more run than he gets. I think Kevin Willard's personality hurts him a little bit because, he seems angry all the time, but that shouldn't have anything to do with winning an award. But yeah, I thought Izzo was a pretty easy choice.
All right, freshman of the year. Do we have any disagreements here? Yeah, this went to Derek Queen of Maryland. I mean, I didn't watch a lot of Maryland, but I know that he was pretty dominant inside all year long for a freshman. He was first team All Big Ten and obviously freshman of the year. Todd, we'll stick with you. Did you have a different thought here, or is it Queen's award?
Nope. Derek Queen was my guy at freshman of the year. He was dominant I wouldn't go dominant. I mean, that team has more than Derek Queen, but
Sure.
He was very good on a very good Maryland team that got better as the season went along. Indiana fans won't like it because he was an Indiana recruiting target, but it paid off for Maryland. And I thought he was better than, the Rutgers, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey got a lot of attention, but their team wasn't as good. I'm forgetting somebody, but yeah, I thought Derek Queen was the guy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was sort of tough at first. We saw Ace Bailey put up like 38 points or something at Assembly Hall. That was pretty impressive, but obviously matters more than one game. And I thought Queen was a pretty easy pick. He was fun to watch all year, sort of his all-around game, and was pretty impressive, I thought.
Okay, let's talk about the first team All Big Ten guys according to the coaches, and then we'll look at the media guys who picked theirs. And there's one difference. There's 4 guys that are the same, and one guy that's different. And for the first team, it was Derek Queen, like we just mentioned, the freshman at Maryland, Bryce Williams out of Nebraska, 2 guys from Purdue, Trey Kaufman-Renn and Braden Smith were unanimous choices according to the coaches, as was John Tonje from Wisconsin. And when you go to the media team, it was all the same, except for Vladislav Golden, the big man from Michigan, took the place of Derek Queen at Maryland, and Trey Kaufman-Renn was not unanimous. But the same 4 guys. So Bryce Williams, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Braden Smith, John Tonje across the board, and then Vladislav Golden and Derek Queen kind of switch places according to the coaches and the media. Jack, we'll start with you. Problems with it, Derek Queen versus Golden. I mean, are we splitting hairs here a little bit? I mean, pretty consistent across the board, though.
Yeah, I mean, the one I think the 2 spots you could argue. I mean, Nick Martinelli ended up leading the Big Ten in scoring, and so I was a little bit surprised that that he was left off there. I think you could argue him instead of Bryce Williams, especially the way that Nebraska. I mean, they lost their last 5 games and got knocked out of the Big Ten tournament. So I could argue there, and then I don't know. The center one I thought was the most difficult to choose because I sort of thought that. I mean, some games you can watch Michigan and argue that Danny Wolf is the better player than Golden, but Golden was a little bit more consistent. I think I think there's an argument to be had with Dawson Garcia. I would maybe even put him ahead of Golden and Queen just for. I mean, a lot of people counted out Minnesota pretty early, and they ended up having, still being pretty respectable and kind of finishing the season decently well, 7-13 in the Big Ten. But no, I mean, I think the other ones were easy: Smith, Tanjay, and Kaufman Wren. But there's always a few, depending on like if you do it by position or however. But yeah, those would be my only nitpicks, I think.
All right, Todd. Anything different from Jack or the coaches or the rest of the media?
Not too much different. I mean, when I did mine for the column I wrote on Monday, I did do it by position, so that influenced it a little bit. So that got Nick Martinelli in as a small forward over, I guess it would be Bryce Williams. Mm-hmm. Bryce Williams was great, but Jack mentioned it. I mean, Nebraska finished the season poorly, and he's a shooting guard, which is a competitive position. I had Tanjay as my shooting guard, so Williams didn't make the cut there. Center, I did have Vlad Golden as my center over both Queen or
Garcia.
No.
Or even Wolf.
Yeah.
Or Wolf, yeah.
I just thought Golden was more versatile. The way Michigan uses him, I mean, he does some things that a traditional center does, but he also stretches out a little bit at times. Works well with Danny Wolf, who's sort of a point power forward for Michigan. But I thought Golden, but I thought that was a competitive spot. And I'll tell you who else deserves mention there is Umar Ballo for IU. I mean, the thing that Umar Ballo does that doesn't necessarily show up in stats is he's a force field around the paint. He doesn't get a ton of block shots. He's not like Khalil Ware last year where he's very flashy in his post defense. But teams don't go in the post against Ballo. And I think that's something, though, that's hard to reflect in stats. But I thought he was one of the best centers in the Big Ten last year.
All right, and now shifting gears a little bit to some categories that you guys came up with. That the Big Ten obviously goes on the list. First, second, third team, honorable mentions, defensive player of the year, stuff like that. But Jack, you came up with a couple different categories here. So surprise team. I mean, which, and I guess didn't specify this, but could that be in either direction? A surprisingly bad or surprisingly good team in the Big Ten here for this past season?
Yeah, I looked at it as surprised in a good way, because then I think we're gonna do most disappointing.
Yeah, most disappointing. True. Yeah.
Sort of the reverse, but for this one, I think you could go in a few different directions, but I would highlight Maryland on this one. They had 4 new starters this year. They were picked 10th in the Big Ten. I know Derek Queen was coming in as like a 5-star or very close to it type of prospect, but you never really know how freshmen are going to pan out and how he would fit with Julian Reese. So yeah, I'd go with them. I mean, I think. If you look at some of the like analytics too, they're 13th in the nation and in KenPom and 11th on the AP poll. I would go with them. I think you can argue a few other teams, but I think last year I was pretty high on them going into the season, and then they disappointed. So then going into this year, I was sort of like, I'm not going to fall for it again, and it ended up kind of being the reverse. So I'd go with Maryland.
All right, Todd, do you have – I think you muted yourself, so I can't unmute you there. So do you have Maryland? Do you have the Terps?
My dog was barking.
He wanted to get involved, man. He wants to give his opinion.
That's a good pick. I had Wisconsin as my
that'd be the other one, yeah.
They were picked 12th in the Big Ten preseason poll. They lost A.J. Storr, Chucky Hepburn, and Connor Esigian from last year's team. They did have some pieces coming back. But I think the vibe on Wisconsin was they're starting to fall back to the pack. And to Greg Gard's credit, Not only did he get some key transfers like Tanjay, but he changed his stripes. I mean, they're playing a completely different way than what they had been playing. High-powered offense, very analytically friendly, and they were right there in the Big Ten hunt. I think they're going to be, and I also think Maryland's going to be dangerous too. I think they're going to be a tough out in the NCAA tournament because of the way they play. I don't think they're going to make the Final Four or anything, but I don't think they're going to be one and out either. So Wisconsin was my team, but Maryland's a good call, and those are the two main ones, I think. And I suppose you can make a case for Michigan given where they were in the standings, but I do think Dusty May had some credit in the bank in terms of what he did at Florida Atlantic and what he would be able to do with resources at Michigan. So yeah, I'll go with the Badgers on this one.
All right, flip side, Todd, we'll stick with you to get it started this time. Most disappointing team that did not live up to the preseason expectations.
Well, I should probably mention the honorable mentions first. And, I'd be a little bit of a homer if I didn't say Indiana needs to be in that category. They're not my main choice. They did play better late, but they were picked second in the Big Ten, and they didn't come close to that. So we'll get that out of the way first. But my pick is Rutgers. I think, and maybe it's not Rutgers' fault. I think the expectations that were placed on Rutgers were even more silly than perhaps the expectations that were placed on Indiana. People forget they were a preseason top 25 team. Rutgers was, and Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper turned out to be pretty damn good. I mean, they were worth the hype. I mean, they proved the hype. But my gosh, the team they built around those guys was just extremely disappointing, especially when Steve Pikiell is known as a really solid coach, defensive-minded coach. And it's like, they threw all that to the wind and they were the opposite of Wisconsin. They changed their stripes in a really bad way. They became very easy to score on. They really didn't have much personnel outside of Harper and Bailey. So, and although they kind of salvaged it a little bit towards the end of the Big Ten season, at no point did they ever win more than 2 games in a row in Big Ten play. So even so I think it's Rutgers partly though, based on a lot of expectations because of Harper and Bailey that were probably a little bit misplaced.
Jack, is it? I couldn't. I mean, I didn't exactly participate in this with you guys, but I don't know how you have 2 draft picks that are supposed to go top 3, top 5, and kind of not do that well in college. That's where I would go as well.
I mean, I think Rutgers is my second pick. I actually think I'd go with Indiana on this one. I mean, they're picked 17th in the 17th in the preseason poll, second behind Purdue in that, and in the preseason Big Ten poll, and now they're barely sneaking into the NCAA tournament or potentially even missing it, depending on what happens, over the next few days. And I mean, I was sort of thinking of it this way too. Like, I'm looking at these teams in the Big Ten that are going to miss the tournament. And I think with Rutgers, I always saw a possibility of all right, they got 2 really good players, but what if everything else falls apart? I mean, I didn't see Nebraska, Iowa, Northwestern as tournament locks. I mean, we expected Washington and Penn State and Minnesota to kind of be down. Ohio State is kind of probably, I think, about what a lot of people thought. So I think if you look at it in terms of the biggest variance of how it played out, I think it's Indiana, even though they've sort of turned it around here and made it a little bit of a happier ending. But I think in the big picture, I always saw a downside to Rutgers. I didn't see quite this big of a drop for Indiana. So
I don't know how
Jack's taking the bullet.
I was going to say, I don't know how Indiana fans handle stuff like that, but I know that's not usually the popular path to take. I mean, credit to you, Jack. I like that. I like going out there and calling it how it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get that. But I mean, also, let's not act like there hasn't been so much negativity all season around this team. I mean,
fair.
There's nothing. Everything you said is absolutely spot on. I mean, it was a disappointment. It'll be interesting to see what the mood of the fan base is when it is finally done.
Yeah.
And if it's tomorrow, I think The vibe has been really positive around for the last week or two, ever since they beat Purdue, basically. And in reality, and I understand it, the win over Purdue was, that was their best win of the year by far. The win at Washington, even though they're the last place team in the Big Ten, was dominant though. I mean, they won that game easy. The other games they played since, they played well at Oregon. I think they deserve a little credit in the bank for that. But honestly, some of the other games, Penn State home game, Ohio State home game, it's not like they were some machine that suddenly figured it out. I'm not really sure how that perception has come into the fan base a little bit, because they very easily could have lost both those games. But I think it'll be interesting if they lose to Oregon tomorrow, how much that will flip back to negativity and all that. But on the other hand, if they make a run, both in Indy and then maybe, to the second round of the NCAA tournament or even the Sweet 16 or something like that, it'll be very fascinating to see how this team is perceived when it's over. So, but that's true for any team, I suppose. But this team in particular has been all over the place in terms of perception, from dire, so terrible to lately probably overreacting maybe a little bit too far the other direction. But we'll see. I guess what I would say is the only reason I would put Rutgers ahead of Indiana is I don't think Rutgers has even had that moment. They've been just pretty much low grade, mediocre all year long, and at least Indiana has had a couple moments here. Like Rutgers doesn't have the equivalent of winning at Michigan State. They didn't. They didn't beat Purdue or anybody else like that. So that's probably where I'd split hairs in terms of Rutgers being more disappointing than IU.
Yeah. I'm not backing off the take, but if Indiana does make the Sweet 16, maybe I will.
All right, fair enough.
For now, that's definitely my. I mean,
hey, these are regular season awards. We're good. Right. You're good. You're fine. Right. I think that's all right. All right, back over to Jack for the first pick here. Most underrated player from the conference this year. Somebody who might not have been listed on any of those teams, or I'm not sure exactly how far down the ladder you want to go, but yeah, most underrated guy.
Yeah, I went with someone that did not get an All Big Ten or even All Big Ten honorable mention. And one player that I really enjoyed watching all season was Trey Holloman on Michigan State. I thought he was kind of like that quintessential Izzo type of guy. Scored 9 points a game, 23 minutes a game. I mean, I think that kind of fits. I mean, he started about half their games. Awesome defender. I just sort of liked watching him all season and kind of still appreciate, like, we've seen him kind of come up from his I think he might be a junior now, but he's sort of steadily climbed, or maybe he's a senior, I don't know. I should probably know that for my pick, but
I can throw it out there. He's a junior who did all the barking and the yapping against Michigan in favor of his teammates seniors. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
I have a slightly different opinion of the guy, but go ahead. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm talking about play on the court. Yeah, I guess I didn't love that. We'll see. We don't need to get into that. I just liked watching him play this season and thought he was a very key part to a Michigan State team that was sort of like it took everyone, not just one guy. And I thought he kind of emulated that.
He is a he's a god in East Lansing because of what he did against Michigan, barking at the two players for Michigan, pushing them off the logo. And you're right, though. I mean, God, I can't even believe I'm defending this on any level, but the whole Spartan dog thing that that's him. Like he's an Izzo guy. Like you said, not a big scorer, but just kind of got that toughness, plays good defense, and will probably be a pretty big leader for them next year. But all right, I'll accept the pick, Jack. I was hoping it wouldn't be a Michigan State guy, but there you have it. Todd, lots of other dudes to choose from. Who are you going with?
Yeah, I like Trey Holloman's a good pick. I'm going to throw in my transfer of the year. I had my column as my underrated player, and that's Maryland's point guard Jacoby Gillespie, who's not really necessarily underrated. I think he was on the third team All Big Ten, but he doesn't get the same attention maybe that Derek Queen gets. Julian Reese has been with Maryland for a while, so he's well known. But Gillespie kind of next to Braden Smith, he was the best point guard in the Big Ten, so he's there. There's a few others. Kobe Johnson on UCLA, I think, is a player I enjoyed watching. He's underrated, and there's others. I don't think he's underrated. I just want to mention Kasparas Yakachonis from Illinois because we haven't mentioned him. I could have I could have had him in there as one of the freshmen too. So he was, I don't think he's underrated, but he's worth mentioning somewhere in here. And then I guess Nick Martinelli is kind of underrated because Northwestern flies under the radar a little bit. You know, I never would have had in a million years would have had him as the leading scorer in the Big Ten.
I was just going to say, I've watched a lot of Big Ten games this year, Michigan games for my own personal interest, a lot of IU games for you guys, started watching Purdue a lot. Had no idea he was leading the conference in scoring. No clue. So there you go. I think that would be a fair pick, even though he was recognized.
The thought just jumped into my head that IU fans listening to this are going to be all over our case because we haven't mentioned Anthony Leal as the underrated player. He is underrated by the rest of the Big Ten. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so one more person left to discuss, I guess, since Todd did a kind of a twofer there. Who is your best transfer, Jack? I mean, obviously, this has become a huge part of college sports and basketball for sure. When you've only got 5 guys on the court, and a transfer can make all the, a world of difference. Who did you see as the biggest help from another school?
Yeah, I'd go with Tanjay here from Wisconsin. I think kind of how Todd mentioned Wisconsin earlier, they lost Chucky Hepburn and AJ Storr, and I feel like Tanjay didn't really get a whole lot of hype going into the year about like, oh yeah, he'll be able to step in and kind of fill that role. So I think that's what the surprise aspect adds to it a little bit. And he did end the season averaging 18 and almost 19 points a game, and it was a big reason for Wisconsin kind of switching up their style a little bit. So I'd go with Tanjay, yeah.
Well, there you have it. We covered a lot of stuff here, fellas. That's, I think, our longest episode to date, just under an hour. And obviously, big game for Indiana tomorrow against Oregon at noon. Potential NCAA tournament implications. It kind of, let me see if I understand this. Do you guys think there's a chance? Do you both think that there's a chance Indiana gets in if they lose to Oregon, or is this game like pivotal for their tournament chances? We'll close with that. Jack, go ahead and get us started.
Yeah, I think they would I think there's a chance they still make it, but it would for sure be in the first 4 in Dayton. I think I would probably call it like 50-50 maybe if they lose, if they'd still make it. I don't know.
All right, and Todd, take us home.
I don't like how they've slid down a little bit in a lot of bracketology this week. I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on what happens in the other conference tournaments. I'm more 25-75. I think they got to win tomorrow. I'm not going to sit here and say they won't make it if they don't, but I wouldn't want to risk it. I mean, there's just too many factors, because the tournament committee, despite what they say, I mean, it is a little ridiculous.
Recency bias.
Yeah, I mean, they won 2 games in the conference tournament, and suddenly you see teams move up like a couple seed lines from that. And it just doesn't make any sense, especially in the power conferences where there's really not as much on the line if you know you're in the field. I mean, you're basically playing for seeding at that point. And the way they treat that is a little ridiculous, in my opinion. But that's how it is. So Indiana shouldn't put that, and Indiana can benefit from that if they make a run. I mean, if they make a run to the championship game, shoot, they could be, up to a 10 seed maybe. I mean, it goes the other way too. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be messing around with a loss tomorrow, especially a bad loss, which Indiana hasn't had one in a while. So, it's a little worrisome. But I think tomorrow's game is going to be close, and we'll see if Indiana has what it takes to come out ahead.
There you have it. Jack and Todd are the experts, and I'm not going to try to put words in their mouth, but it sounds like pretty close to a must-win. Pretty close to a must-win for Indiana tomorrow against Oregon. That tips off at noon. So I know a lot of Indiana fans will be locked in for that. Well, thank you guys so much for listening, everybody out there. About an hour from us 3, so hopefully you were able to stay in tune the whole time. And we'll be back next week to talk about – could be a very different show. Tuesday show next week could be a very different show depending on what happens tomorrow and what looks like for Indiana for the rest of the way. So thanks for listening, everybody. And Todd, go ahead.
We could be in Dayton.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hope not. Let's hope not. Or I don't want to be in Dayton. So let's hope it goes a different direction.
Topics of discussion could be different. Their physical location could be different. We got a lot of stuff going on. We'll figure it out, and we'll be back next week. Thanks, guys.